morning, everybody, and welcome to LAQ's CLE webinar for March. I'd just like to start today by acknowledging the traditional owners in the lands that everyone is joining us from. Paul and I are streaming today from the Yuggera and Turrbal lands in Meanjin, Brisbane.
The webinar you have entered as
I'm so sorry.
in listen-only mode.
I'm not sure why my computer is doing that. Apologies. So I just wanted to acknowledge and respect the First Nations custodians of the lands that we're all meeting on today, and where we all work to help disadvantaged Queenslanders uphold their rights in our legal and justice system and in the financial systems that Australia has. We pay respect to elders, law, customs and creation spirits, and I just want to also recognise that these lands that we're meeting on today have always been lands of gathering and learning and teaching. And that Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people have played a huge role in our communities and improving our legal system. So this morning our webinar is on cost of living pressures and legal rights. And our presenters today are Paul Holmes, who's here with me in our studio, for want of a better word, and Jillian McKinlay, who's joining us from the Financial Counsellors Association of Queensland. I also just want to acknowledge and thank our two Auslan interpreters who are helping us make our webinar accessible this morning. Just a little bit of housekeeping before we jump into the content. So I just want to let you all know that our webinar this morning is being recorded, and the laws and content are accurate on the day of the live presentation. That might change in the future. There's a lot of information available on our community legal education resources page, and the links to all of this will be available in our handouts which come out with the webinar. If you do run into any technical difficulties today, unfortunately we're not able to give you much help while the webinar is streaming live. There is a link there as well to the GoToWebinar customer support page for technical help, and you can just pop that into Google, it will come up straight away. So we do welcome and encourage questions today. I know that this slide says please hold them till the end, but we welcome questions all the way through the webinar. There's a little tab on your control panel there that says questions. If you can enter them in there, we'll be able to read them out and incorporate them into the webinar where it's relevant. If we don't answer your question today, Paul and Jill have kindly agreed to allow me to send them through to them, and they'll answer questions directly where possible. There's also a button there you can click to download the handouts. Also, all of our handouts will come out to you after the webinar with the webinar recording link once this goes up on YouTube. So just going to jump into a few polls this morning. These just help us get to know who's in the room with us because we can't see you. So our first poll is about where you are, which region in Queensland you work in. I'm just going to launch that one now. So we've got a lot of people joining us from Southeast Queensland, a few coming through from out of Queensland. Paul, do you mind if I just ask if the laws we're talking about today are relevant outside of Queensland?
Yes, on the whole, and if they're not, we'll let people know along the way.
Okay, thank you. So thanks everybody for, oh, we're still getting responses through. I'm just giving you a couple more seconds and I'm going to close that one off. Thank you. I'll just share those results with you just for your information so you know who's in the room with you today. Most people are joining us from Southeast Queensland, but we have a few from regional and quite a few from outside of Queensland. So I just want to say welcome to everybody. So moving forward, the next poll is what is your role? This just helps us to modify our information in case there are a lot of lawyers in the room or no lawyers in the room. Just helps us know if we need to give a lot of technical information or if we're all good to just talk in a little bit more plain language. Lots of financial counsellors joining us today. Welcome everybody. A few lawyers. Just letting you know, the lawyers in the room, the law that we will be talking about today is not as technical as it would be in a CPD webinar, but we hope that you do still find the information very useful for your practice. And you are absolutely more than welcome, but also thank you everybody else for joining us today. I'm just going to close that poll off and share those results so you can see who else is in the room with you. And our last poll today is going to help us modulate the information that we're presenting today. Excuse me, it's 10 o'clock in the morning. I need another coffee. So if you can let us know how much experience you have helping people who are dealing with financial hardship, if this has been your core role and you have a lot of experience, you have a little experience, you have no experience, or if you're currently the person who's experiencing financial hardship. This is just going to help our presenters with the information that they present. Okay, so we've got a lot of knowledgeable people in the room, but also a lot of people who are here to find out more, which is great. I'm just going to close that survey off now. Thank you so much, everybody, for your participation in the polls. I'm not going to share, I will share that one just quickly, just so you know that, yeah, we've got a wide spectrum of people with us today. Thank you so much for your participation. I'm going to hand over to Paul now and to Jill, and they're going to take you through our webinar today. Thanks very much, Paul.
Thank you very much, Emma, and welcome, Jill. It's good to be doing our presentation with you. The plan we had today, everybody in the audience, is to explore this issue through a couple of case studies, because we think there's nothing better than having a practical scenario to talk about what you can do and how best to help people. So what we hope you get out of it is some new knowledge about different ways different industries approach it, and how best you can assist some of the clients that you see. And I know Jill and I both welcome questions as we go along, because if you've got the burning issue at the time, make sure you send it through, because then it gives us the ability to address it while it's fresh in your mind. All right, let's have a look at our first case study, where we're talking about Mary and John. And I'll read it through, but it's up there for you guys to read as well. We've got Mary working as a teacher aide, John's working as a roofer. John's been injured along the way with an ACL injury. For those of you who don't play a lot of sport like me, that's in your knee, and generally takes about 12 months for you to recover from. Mary and John are struggling financially. They're behind a couple of months on their mortgage. They're 3 months behind on their rates. They've been using buy now, pay later to pay for food, and they've got concerns about their ability to pay their upcoming utility bills. So that's energy and water.
So there's a lot going on for Mary and John, to say the least.
Yeah, a lot. But Jill, I'd say that's a fairly common scenario, particularly financial counsellors would get.
Yeah, exceptionally. And typically, given the behind in the mortgage and the council rates, and then going to buy now, pay later as a way to manage the home if they don't have any other access to credit.
Yeah, I think that's right. So in terms of priority, where would you start, Jill, in those?
Well, where would I start? I always start with the asset, Paul.
So do I. Absolutely.
Risk to the asset?
Yeah, so we've got, what do we got? We've got about $50,000 worth of equity in the asset, which is the mortgage. And 2 months behind, at the moment, really, they've just got enough, probably one income coming in, being Mary's teacher. The lawyer and me, the first question I'm asking is he getting legal advice about the personal injury, not knowing the circumstances behind it?
Mm-hmm.
Because, for example, if it occurred at work, he might be entitled to a payout that might help with some of the financial hardship. But that's not going to help him in the short term, is it?
No.
So with the mortgage, the lenders refuse financial hardship. Does that open up any avenues for us?
Absolutely. Because you've got to ask the lender. I'm assuming the lender has refused financial hardship on the basis that that they couldn't afford the loan anyway.
Yeah.
From the start. But it may be that Mary and John haven't talked to the lender about the injury, mostly out of fear, I would guess.
Very, very definitely about fear, because there's rightly or wrongly in the community, there's a shame about being in financial trouble, at least in my experience. So I think the first thing I'd be advising is, let's have another talk to the lender, let them know about exactly what's going on with your circumstances.
Yes.
And if they say no, I'm probably headed off to Africa.
Yeah. And straight away too, like I wouldn't, you engage with the lender in the first instance, but if you're getting no joy, then you would, in this circumstance, I, as a financial counsellor, with my financial counselling hat on, would go to AFCA because there's a significant risk to the to the property being sold quite quickly, and we've got to give consideration. We haven't even talked about council rates yet, but there's a concern there as well.
Absolutely, there is, and I guess the thing to think about regarding the mortgage is the rental market is so horribly bad in most of Queensland at the moment. Selling the property and renting really isn't an option that it was maybe 4 or 5 years ago. I remember giving advice quite regularly saying, get your equity out, go and rent. It's just not really an option anymore.
No, and in fact, in some areas of Queensland, the rental market is more expensive than the mortgage.
Yes,
so
absolutely.
So you've got to look at it from a practical perspective about affordability in your particular area. Like, I'm conscious that we're talking to a broad range of people in all over the state and interstate, and those rental markets will be different.
Absolutely. And there's a point made on the questions, Jill, that they've encountered some people who've actually increased the equity in their homes. And that's probably reflective of the fact that, at least what I'm seeing, is we've got a very two-speed economy at the moment. Some people are doing very, very well, but there's a whole segment that are really struggling to make ends meet.
Yeah. And typically for someone like Mary and John, there's not going to be a lot of asset pool prior to John's accident, his ACL injury.
I agree, which makes it very difficult, for them going forward. But you raised the rates before. Let's say we get hardship on the mortgage. We've still got a problem with the rates.
Yep.
Because there's a difference between what legally a lender must do when it comes to financial hardship and what legally a council must do.
That does raise a question. Do councils need to consider financial hardship applications?
In short, legally, no.
No.
Some councils do have hardship policies, Jill.
Yes.
Don't they? But
yeah, that's
really
true. Yeah. Sorry, you go, Paul.
No, I was just saying, but it's really inconsistent. Is that your experience as well?
Yes, it is. It's very inconsistent across the state. You would, my first port of call would be to ring their council in question and have a conversation with them about the situation. Like, from a financial counselling perspective, you'd want to have your statement of financial position really solid and ready to go with all your supporting evidence to support someone in that. Once you've identified and you've got a counsel that's willing to work with you, in Mary and John's situation, you'd be reasonably confident to get a payment arrangement for them in the short term. But you'd want it won't last forever though. It's a short-term option for John's recovery.
And if that recovery takes a bit longer, there's often a bit of a problem.
Yeah. And that's when I put a holistic perspective on it as well. And Mary and John are going to come in to you with a lot of hope and expectations that, you know, rightly or wrongly, whether you are able to save their property. So from my perspective, we've got to be very open and honest about the stages in their financial hardship. So financial hardship has a life cycle. It has immediate term, about a month, then your short term, which is 3 to 6 months, depending on the situation, and then you have to take a longer term view. Is Mary and John going to be better off in the long term? That's always my go-to. Paul, what's your perspective on that?
Look, I think that's right. And I think that's very difficult for people who are in financial hardship often to get their heads around, because they're very much in how do I get through the next week? How do I get through the next fortnight and survive type mentality, which is perfectly reasonable given what they've experienced, but it can take a little bit to get them thinking that forward perspective. But I think it's a really important perspective to think through.
Yeah, and you raise a very good point, because as a worker, your brain is geared to thinking in those stages, but someone who is living hand to mouth every week is not. They're thinking about all those basic living needs, like roof over the head, food on the table, can I keep the lights on?
Absolutely.
Their brains, yeah.
And there's a good point raised about one of the counsellors on the Sunshine Coast on the questions around councils not pausing interest on rates arrears. I'll be honest, I haven't seen a single council pause interest on rates arrears. Have you?
No. I don't think it happens. I'd welcome anyone to make a comment about a council that does. But no, interest rates don't get paused.
Oh, absolutely. And I think the other point we need to cover just quickly on the financial hardship on the mortgage is there's now a requirement, if you ask for financial hardship from your bank, they have to record that on your credit report.
Yeah.
And that freaks people out a bit.
Yes.
We are assured that it doesn't affect their ability to access credit. But I think the reality is, if you're in financial hardship, not many people are going to give you credit anyway.
No. And what's the timeframes on that? I'm thinking it's 2 years that it stays on your credit file. Financial hardship, does it run?
I'm just trying to recall. I think I'll have to follow that up, and the answer is either 12 or 2 years. I'm pretty sure you're right, it's 2 years, but I will have to confirm that after the webinar.
I'm just picturing the credit reports in my head, and I think, anyway, we can follow that up, but it's really interesting. Like an interesting scenario here is what happens if Mary and John split up?
Yes, absolutely. And let's hypothetically say there might be some DV and Mary leaves the house and John stays in there and says, I'm not getting out.
Yes. And then you've got to ask yourself from a practical perspective then, who's your client?
Yeah.
And it's very common for couples to have relationships issues anyway, when there's a ongoing financial component. So almost when the injury's been for 3 months, if they've been in arrears prior to that injury, then there could be relationship issues going in. So my suggestion would be, on a part of your intake would be to ask both Mary and John separately, how's the relationship going?
Yeah, I think that's right, and that also opens up financial abuse issues that you need to be really, really, really aware of. But we'll come to them later, I think.
Yeah.
We'll say nice things, Jill, about Toowoomba Regional Council. We've had a question or a comment coming through saying they will pause interest once, only if hardship is applied for, and the rates are more than 2 years in arrears, but not reached 3. So,
okay.
To Toowoomba Regional Council on that one.
Yes.
And the other comment that's come through is around body corporates charging $300 to set up a payment plan, which body corporates are another beast entirely to councils.
Yes.
charge lots of interest, and probably even have less legal requirements than the council when it comes to these things.
Yes. So in Mary and John's case, if their mortgage was on, I don't know, a unit, for example, and they had body corporate arrears as well, from a practical perspective, I would be looking at the mortgage and the body corporate first, then the council rates, because I know that the body corporates will typically act a lot faster than the lender would or than the council would.
I agree with that, Jill. That's absolutely right.
We've really got to get an understanding of how far they're behind, what the body corporate fees are, because that'll go really quickly, and they could potentially lose the house quite quickly.
Absolutely, and there's also the issue that if body corporates or the council need to start legal action or get lawyers involved, the person who's behind also gets charged for those fees as well.
Yes. Yep.
And that's perfectly legal.
Yep. So, like, it can get extremely expensive quite quickly. And for someone in Mary and John's position, with, like, you know, they haven't only got 50,000 equity in their property, they're not going to come away from the sale of that asset owing no money.
Yeah, they may still owe more money, and they're still liable to pay that.
Yeah,
which is not ideal.
Yeah. I'm just going to pull this and see me. There was a question submitted earlier before the webinar. Can, in that situation that the sale of the house is likely, but there'll be a shortfall, can the lender prevent the sale, or is that a likely thing that would happen?
Look, for a sale to go through by the council, the lender can't stop that.
Okay.
If the council's done everything they need to do, or if the body corporate's gone and got a judgment and got an order to repossess and sell the property, that they can't not let the sale go through. But for the sale to be effective, obviously you'd hope the mortgage gets released. But we have seen instances where something's been auctioned for council rates, and there's still been a mortgage there.
And so this person is still liable for that outstanding
Well,
amount.
it's the new owner
that
needs to deal with the mortgage somehow.
Really?
Yes, because the mortgage still sits there.
On the house.
It's because it sits attached to the house.
Right. That's interesting.
Just really quickly to finish off this case study, the buy now, pay later products. I know they're a source of frustration to me in dealing with clients, and I'm sure financial counsellors have the same problem, Jill. Are you seeing it? Yeah. Are you seeing it used more and more for basic expenses?
Oh, yes is the short answer. What will typically happen is someone in Mary and John's position, they will have multiple buy now, pay later products. And when I say multiple, I mean upwards. I'm sure the financial counsellors in the room will tell me there's more, but you can get up to 10 or more sometimes. And the access and the reason why people are accessing it is changing when the products first started. So in recent years, people are, as in this case example, they'll be accessing it for things like food, or they might access it to go to the dentist or to pay for their, pet vet fees. There's lots of different things that are they being used for now. And the devil in this product is they've all got direct debits that come out pretty quick. So as soon as their pay hits their bank accounts, the direct debits go out. So buy now, pay later always gets paid first.
And interestingly, the government is going to regulate buy now, pay later as part of the National Credit Code. And for those who are interested, there is currently a consultation paper out on the Commonwealth Treasury's website, which has draft legislation that you can look at and comment on in dealing with that. We're obviously hoping the better or the more regulation, the more it will help people who we're seeing.
Yes, so I think they're calling them continuing or non-continuing credit contracts.
Yep.
And the low cost, interest free. Yeah.
Just to backtrack a little, there's a question that's come through around the mortgage shortfall when things are sold. So I just might quickly go through that again. Let's say it's the lender that sells the property because you're behind on your mortgage. If that happens and there's a shortfall, you remain liable to whoever had your mortgage for that shortfall. Let's say the council sells the property and somebody buys it. The mortgage is still attached to that property, but you, because you've signed the mortgage, still have liability under the mortgage contract to pay the mortgage. The thing about what happens there is I find a lot of people in that position just stop paying the mortgage because they know, or somebody's told them, that if the mortgage isn't paid, what happens is the property gets sold. So many people effectively foist the problem onto whoever buys the property at the council auction. That's the reality of what I see happening. Do you see anything similar, Jill?
Yeah, no, I couldn't agree more, Paul. I think that's exactly what's going to happen. With our Mary and John, I think it's important to, when speaking with them, to be able to keep in contact with them, to keep them updated like every step of the way once that you have got this case running and moving. Because if at the beginning we said if we're not getting any joy with the lender and we've moved it across to AFCA, then we need to keep them informed. So keeping that, and that helps that with your engagement. So you don't have to sit down and have a full-on client session with them, but keeping them up to date, either Teams or on the phone, is very important. And it helps you check base with the couple as well to see how they're faring, because they'll be having other issues as well. Maybe John's gone and got workers, making a claim for workers' compensation. So you'll need that information and try and keep up to date so you can feed that back to the lender or back to AFCA.
Absolutely.
Can I just expand there on what AFCA is? So the Australian Financial Complaints Authority, for those in the audience who aren't sure, and there'll be some resources coming out about that.
Apologies,
That's okay.
I'm guilty of speaking in acronyms at times.
Yeah, me too. If anyone in the audience hasn't raised a complaint with AFCA, I encourage you to go onto their website. They've got some really good information, and raising a complaint is relatively a simple process. So you could potentially encourage your own clients to do that for themselves too. It's a great way to empower them into their own financial decision making.
I agree with that. All right, and then just finally on this case study, if there's financial hardship on water and electricity, most of those companies have pretty good hardship options in my experience.
Yes, out of all the issues on the case study here, the hardship with the utility bills is the one that I'm least concerned about, and is probably, as a financial counsellor, that would be one that if I'd probably be tackling the assets in the first session with a client, but that would be a bill that I would give them information about and see if they can go and get an arrangement potentially for themselves.
Thank you.
Sometimes that doesn't work.
And thank you to Belinda in the audience who's cleared my brain up on the credit reporting issue. Repayment history information, which is whether you're behind on your mortgage or your credit card, that's on the credit report for 2 years.
Oh, great.
An actual hardship application is only retained on it for 1. So thank you, Belinda. We were confusing the two, I think, between us. So
Yes,
good pickup.
Can I just ask there, with that information on your credit file, what's the impact if you apply for a loan, if you apply for a credit card? What's the impact of having that information on your credit report?
The reality of repayment history information is it makes it much harder for you to get a loan. We're told having a hardship arrangement on your credit report should just encourage people or banks or financiers to ask you more questions to see whether or not you're out of the hardship.
Okay.
I don't think it's probably been going long enough for us to have a good feel for whether that's actually happening in every circumstance.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
And then the other little thing that I just thought was worth talking about, given they're spending buy now, pay later on food, the ACCC actually has a supermarket pricing inquiry on at the moment, which is open for submissions. So if anybody is interested in making those submissions, that's probably a good thing to have a look at. All right, let's move on to case study number 2. Jill, do you want to start taking us through that one?
Yeah, I'll read out. So Taylor is a 19-year-old single mother with a 3-year-old son. She works casually in retail and receives single parenting pension. Taylor left a violent relationship 12 months ago and is studying year 12 and wants to join the armed forces. Taylor's financial challenges. She has 2 mobile phone contracts. Her ex-partner has the other phone and is 1 month behind on payments on both of the phone contracts. She has purchased a used car, which broke down 3 months after purchase, 2 months behind on repayments. Her rent has increased by 10% and she's 1 week in rent arrears. Her casual income has decreased since Christmas. So moving on to her issues. So Paul, what would you look at first in Taylor's situation?
Look, my first step there is always to make sure she's safe.
Yep.
Before we do any of the legal issues, before we do anything like that, she has to be safe. And for some people, that will take a couple of months, and so for some people, that could take a couple of years.
Yes. And it depends a lot too on, I'm conscious how much contact that Taylor has with her ex-partner.
Yep.
It can take several attempts to leave a violent relationship, and she's only just left 12 months ago. The other thing to factor in for Taylor, I think, is that she's 19 years old and she has a 3-year-old son. She has some life experiences, but perhaps her understanding of what her rights and responsibilities as far as legal products go, or contracts, or buying a used car, or rent, or, you know, even her own wages, might not be there yet because she hasn't had that life experience or that time to gather that wisdom.
Yeah, I agree. But if we've settled that, then I'm looking at a roof over her head next.
Yes. Yeah. So it always comes back to basics, doesn't it? Like roof over the head, food on the table. Can you sustain going to, you know, she needs to sustain her living, her casual income, and she has ambitions to finish year 12 and to, you know, get a career in the armed forces, which is something that you'd want to encourage above all else, because that's the single thing that will, an education will support her getting out of financial hardship in the long term.
May I ask, in regards to keeping a roof over her head, the fact that Taylor left a violent relationship, do landlords tenants, banks, things that need to take into account domestic violence, or can they take into account domestic violence when it comes to rent arrears?
Look, banks are good at it for mortgages.
Yeah.
I don't have the rental knowledge to comment on that in terms of rent. I don't know if you do, Jill.
I can only go on anecdotal evidence from the clients that I've supported. So some landlords do make allowances for experience of domestic and family violence, but my understanding is that that they don't necessarily have to. What I've found to be helpful in this situation, is getting increasingly difficult, is to try and link Taylor in with different transitional housing services that might be able to guarantee a lower rent. But I know I've got 56% financial counsellors listening in, and they'll say, yeah, Jill, where's that going to happen? But you might also, some in your different areas, you might be able to find some agencies that will provide rental brokerage for a week. So the good news in this for me is that she's only a week behind, and providing that I can demonstrate to the not-for-profit service that's providing brokerage that it's affordable, then I'd be able to, get her rent back up to date. But then we've got to prioritise paying the rent, and then I would look at, okay, how do we support Taylor to have food on her table? So we'll have to flip it seems counterproductive sometimes to flip it and say, okay, we've got to put a roof over their head first before feeding you. But it's easier to get emergency relief for food or other services than it is to get rent assistance.
Absolutely. And I guess the other part of that discussion is we're probably having a discussion with Centrelink to make sure she's got access to everything she's entitled to there.
Yeah. And that's always, like, I think most financial counsellors would do that in the first instance, is to check the Centrelink payouts and make sure that she's at the absolute maximum that she can afford. The other thing too to factor in is because she's left a violent relationship, she may be entitled to child support, but a lot of women in this circumstance choose not to request child support from their ex-partner because it can increase the violence towards them or their child.
Yeah, and may place them in danger again.
Yeah. So with Taylor, it's always like we've got this over-encompassing lens of safety at all times with her.
Absolutely. What do you reckon about the car?
Yes. What do I reckon about the car? She's bought a lemon, Paul, is what I think.
Absolutely, she has.
Yeah.
But I guess it's worth saying there's no legislation that specifically says this is a lemon car. No. But there's lots of legislation that expects something to be of an appropriate standard and fit for the purpose that you've bought it, which is in the Australian Consumer Law guarantees.
Yes.
My experience though is if I ask a client to go to who they bought the car from and go, you've breached the Australian Consumer Law, they'll usually get told to rack off. Is that your experience?
Yeah, they don't. Yes, that it's not fruitful. And sometimes I've had clients that have been threatened with violence at some point. So for Taylor, I'm not sure that going to the car dealer would be an ideal situation for her.
And this opens up a good discussion about sometimes legal remedies aren't really appropriate, because her option is to go to QCAT and bring a motor vehicle claim.
Yeah.
The QCAT is the Queensland Civil and Administrative Tribunal. But the headspace she's in at the moment, I'm pretty sure she's not going to cope with that.
No, there's no way that she's ready. I mean, she could apply and, you know, under financial hardship grounds and get an application to QCAT and run through that whole process. But I don't see her, honestly, I don't see her having the brain capacity to be able to juggle all of the things in her life. And that's not it's not derogatory on Taylor, it's just that she's dealing with a lot. So I am very curious on the next question though.
Yeah.
Has there been false or misleading representations at the time of purchase?
Yeah. And that's a really good discussion to have with the client around, okay, when you went into the car yard, what did they tell you? What did they tell you about the car? What did they tell you about your repayments? What did they tell you about the affordability? What did they tell you about the history of the car? Asking all of those sorts of questions might open up that legal remedy when she's ready to take it. Because I agree with you, it's not something that she's in the headspace to do at the moment.
No. And it's asking those questions about what happened at the car yard when you bought the car can be extremely fruitful when you're arguing with you know, the secure lender, because, you know, she's been provided the loan basically at the time of sale. So it's interesting to find those information out, because then you can use that information to go back to the secure car lender and say, what are you doing? What's happening here? And you can lay out quite quickly what's happened. Also, it opens up to see, like, you know, you want to get all the contracts and all the bits of information. Look at my technical terms, bits of information. You want to get information about the insurances that she may have been sold. You know, she may have been sold junk insurance at the time of the sale of the car. So that is very interesting information to have, because typically if she's been sold junk insurance as well, that'll be added onto the cost of the loan, and she won't, and Taylor typically won't know. Would you agree, Paul?
I agree. And the good bit about that is most insurers, when that's drawn to their attention in the last couple of years, are refunding those insurance premiums.
Yeah. And there's a great
financially. Yeah. What's the website?
Yeah, demand a refund.
Yeah.
There's a great you know, sample letter on there. You can just fill in the details and send it off. It doesn't take much time at all from a case management perspective if you've got all the details you need, and you can be quite successful quite quickly of getting that refunded. So, I mean, one of the key things to mention to Taylor is sometimes if she's still got if she hasn't paid out the loan, then it goes straight to the lender and it comes off the amount that she owes. But if she's paid out the loan, then that money will go straight to her.
Yep. And just following up on a question that's come through, consumer law guarantees apply to both new and second-hand cars. However, obviously what you would expect out of a brand new car in terms of it lasting versus what you would expect out of a second-hand car with 300,000 Ks on the odometer are going to be very different.
Can I just ask also, you mentioned that there is, with all the things that Taylor is dealing with, she may not have the brain space to follow this up legally yet.
Yeah.
Is there a limitation on when she can do that? Or is that?
Most of these issues have a time limitation legally of 6 years. There's a couple that have 3.
Yeah.
But that's always you draw it to people's attention, but they've got to be in a space to deal with it.
Right. So it's not the key factor. Not too worried about
it. Well, it's a key factor in terms of her rights.
Yes.
But she wants to be safe.
Yes.
She needs a roof over her head and she needs food.
Okay.
until she's comfortable with all of that, she's not going to do much else.
Yeah, okay, thank you.
Would you agree, Jill?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. And her priorities are going to change as you're working through this case as well. Look, I mean, having just had a child finish year 12, if she's studying year 12 and's got a 3-year-old at the same time, that workload is massive. So just from a case management perspective, I think you would expect to be doing most of the legwork for her in this instance, unless of course she gives you instructions to the contrary.
Yeah.
But I think this is an example of a case where I would expect that a financial counsellor or a support worker would be running this case pretty much the whole time.
Yeah. The other thing I check on the car, particularly in southeast Queensland, and I know there's toll roads in other states.
Oh yes, good point.
Is make sure the X isn't on the tolling account, because if the X is on the tolling account, I've seen cases where they've used that to track the person down.
Yeah, I mean, that's an excellent point. Like financial abuse, I find to be one of the in domestic and family violence relationships, that's one of the last things that leaves. Like you can financially abuse someone way out long, years after they've left.
I agree.
Okay.
The mobile phone, Jill, can we do anything about those?
Yeah, that's a tricky one, isn't it? Yeah, look, you can. I guess it's difficult because the ex has one of the phones. So if we change anything with the phone contract, the way it stands, and the ex still has the phone, then that could trigger domestic and family violence again. So we have to be mindful about that in the first instance. With her phone, you could work with the phone company to change the phone plan that she's on so that it's a more affordable product for her. And then you might have issues around the cost of the phone itself. So depending on what type of phone that she has, what condition it's in, if she wanted to surrender the phone, her own phone, then she could do that. But again, you've got to factor in what condition the phone's in. So if the phone is cracked or broken or any stage, that might have an impact on whether the phone company will accept will accept it.
Absolutely. And the other thing there I'd look at, and I believe we might see a webinar about this soon from Financial Counsellor in Queensland, is Telstra's got in trouble recently for mis-selling phone products, particularly to First Nations people.
Yeah. And yes, that's right. And there's been multiple contracts. So in that instance, like Telstra's mis-selling, they've mis-sold to First Nations people for quite some time, and they've been the victims of mis-selling. So I suppose from a casework perspective, you've got to look for what are the signs of mis-selling, and typically there'll be high plans or sold multiple devices and accessories. Then you might have someone that they might need to purchase prepaid phones, or end up being sold a phone plan with those accessories. They might even have, people might have unsolicited calls from people where they've been asked to come into the store, and then they end up being sold a phone plan or multiple devices. It's not just the Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander communities as well. If you've ever had someone that has an acquired brain injury or someone who's intellectually disabled, I've had that circumstance happen. There is an opportunity though to get compensation for that, and you can submit your forms if it's with Telstra. Well, it is with Telstra. There's a website address for forms at Financial Counsellor Customer Support, and I can supply that to the group so you can have a look at the form. But yes, we're going to be doing another session, I think, around Telstra and mis-selling. Yeah. But it's
Okay.
it's a big topic for me to summarise in 5 minutes.
It's more letting everybody know about it and letting them be aware of there's more information coming. And a shout out to Alex from ICANN who reminded us about how important this is. Yeah,
and we've got a time frame on people to be able to claim the compensation as well. So it's going to be running out soon. So I'm keen for people to hear about if you see something with a Telstra mobile phone and there has been mis-selling and you think that your client may have been mis-sold products, then they do have the ability to claim compensation, and it can be quite high, the amounts of money that are being repaid to customers.
And the other thing we didn't explore about the car that one of our questions come through is you and I will always look at a car loan to make sure it's been responsibly lent before we go any further. Absolutely, you do that every single time.
Absolutely. And I suspect with Taylor's case that there would be you would be able to find areas in the consumer law that might have been breached in that contract. I once had a client who thought that they were getting they got a loan for a used car, and the witness who signed it was their carer, and they thought that they were both signed up for the contract, where it was in fact just the one person.
Yeah. Yes, unfortunately, that's far too common.
Yeah.
All right. We've spoken a little bit about domestic and family violence in this space. I guess it's probably worth, and we've probably got about 10 minutes left, people in the audience. If you've got questions that you have that we haven't answered, start putting them through to us, please. So in terms of family and domestic violence, one of the good things that's happened in the last sort of 3 or 4 years is we now have a lot of lenders and financiers with domestic violence policies.
Yes. And they can be they're very it's been quite a productive area to work with lenders in that space. There's been a big change in the way that lenders view domestic and family violence and the considerations that they can make for their customers. And I always, even if they don't have a mortgage, I always ring the lender and be a bit cheeky and see if there's anything that they can do to support their customer. You'd be surprised what a lender will do to support someone who's trying to leave domestic and family violence situation.
I've certainly seen them pay for moving costs before, just as an example.
Yeah. And that can be a reason for someone not leaving, is because they can't afford to move. Or the reason why they get out a buy now, pay later loan, because they need to buy furniture or to set up their house. And in that sense, from a support services perspective, that's where you come in. Like, there are NILS loans out there, so no interest loan schemes. There are other services as well that can help you, like, support your client to furnish a new home, and they don't have to pay any interest on a loan, or they can get donations. So Give It is another area that some financial counsellors use to support their clients who are leaving domestic and family violence, so that they can set up their new home with their family.
And another one that comes to mind when they start looking for work is places like Fitted for Work that provide access to appropriate businesswear to go to the interview to help people out in that respect.
Yes, yeah. So there's lots of different services out there. I think it's just a matter of reaching out to either your colleagues or, you know, someone else in the community service industry, and you'll find lots of different services there that can provide that wraparound support so that you can specialise in the area that your support is best directed.
Agreed. All right, we've got about 5 minutes exactly for any questions that people have out there that you were hoping we would answer, or burning questions you want the answer to. But I think my takeaway, or my takeaway for this for everybody is people have legal rights about financial hardship, and people also have access to other non-legal things which can help them. It's really a question of making sure you ask, because if you don't ask, you don't know what's out there. That would be my big takeaway. Jill, what do you think?
Yes, and to my big takeaway is to consider the client's whole situation.
Yeah.
And to listen to what the client wants, because sometimes what is legally possible for them or what their rights are may not be suited to what they need right now.
Yep.
And just to know that there is a community of support, as Paul said, that can support you in your role. You don't have to do everything.
Excellent.
Yeah.
I think that's a really, really good point, because that's how we find our knowledge and build our knowledge is by talking to others who've been there and done that.
Yeah.
I think that's a really good note to end on, is that communicate with everybody. Communicate if you're having trouble, talk to somebody, talk to your financial counsellors, talk to your lawyers. And if you are a financial counsellor or a lawyer and you have questions, talk to your colleagues. There's a wealth of information out there.
One really good question popped through just before we finish, and that is around, with mortgage and rates arrears, how often would you explore accessing super? And that's something we haven't covered yet.
No.
And my short answer, Jill, is unless it's going to make a difference and allow people to pay the mortgage and rates going forward, all you're doing is draining your super account and risking the person being in the same problem in 3 or 6 months' time.
Yes, I'm of the same view. If it's going to, if drawing down the super will pay out the arrears and the interest, and they've got affordability after that, then I think that's a good option. However, they will just drain their super, and they need that for when they're older.
Agreed.
Okay, I might pop back in there. We're just about out of time today. Thank you so much, Jill and Paul, for all of your knowledge and coming to share that with us today. I think this has been a fantastic webinar. I just wanted to touch on a few things that came up. There were a few questions in the chat box that we couldn't answer because they were very specifically focused on people's specific situations. So I want to encourage you to get in touch with Legal Aid or with AFCA or with Financial Counsellors Association of Queensland to go into those issues. You can get in touch with us on the legal information lines that are on the screen at the moment. The other option you have as well is to reach out to your local community legal centre. They're also experts in this field, and they can get you in touch with other support agencies as well. To find your local community legal centre, I've just realised that I'm not on that computer. The website is communitylegalqueensland.org.au, and I'll also put that in the notes that I'll send out in the email. I will also put in a lot of the links that we've talked about today to other organisations that can help, like Fitted for Work and a few of the other schemes that you both mentioned. The other question we had was can I mention the AFCA website? So the Australian Financial Complaints Authority is www.afca.org.au, and that one will go in the email as well.
If the individuals out there want to talk to a financial counsellor, the best number to ring, and I call it the James Bond number, is 1800 007 007, and they can put you in touch with an appropriate financial counsellor.
Thanks so much for that,
Yeah.
Paul.
Just think
Thank you
about
again.
James Bond and that'll get you there.
Exactly. So thanks everyone again for joining us. I've just got some information there about our community legal education website. We've got heaps of information available online. Join us again next month. Our next webinar is on April 17, and it's going to talk about therapeutic pathways away from court for criminal offenders, the Queensland Drug and Alcohol Court and Court Link. Thanks again, everybody, and have a great day.
Thank you all.
Thank you.